Hi, I'm Shay Oliver. Welcome to the Priority Paradigm. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've made radical changes in their lives for something more important. Today, I'm joined by Devin Thorpe, and he has an awesome story to share with us. So without further ado, Devin, take it away.
Thanks, Shay. It's great to be with you. I appreciate you taking the interest in my little story.
Absolutely.
I guess, and don't be nervous, I think my story really begins when I was 11 years old,
Okay.
which, if I'm judging my curly hair against yours correctly, was before you were born. But in 1976, there was a dam built in southern Idaho near Rexburg. And you're from Colorado, you probably have a sense of that geography, but the dam called the Teton Dam there, you can see the Tetons from there. The dam failed the first time they filled the reservoir.
Oh my gosh.
And the flood damaged or destroyed about 80% of the structures in Rexburg. It was a major disaster for that community.
Wow.
Well, that summer, people from communities all around the Western United States, loaded up by the busloads to go volunteer time cleaning up muck and mud out of basements in Rexburg. One day that summer, my dad came to me and said, "Devin, I'm going Saturday to Rexburg. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Well, sure. Digging muck and mud out of a basement sounds like a good time." So we got on a bus at 2:00 in the morning, and for me that was a big adventure. And so I remember the whole ride up to Rexburg. We got there about dawn, worked all day until it got dark, and then we got back on the bus and came home. I remember nothing of the trip home or how I even got back in the house. It was a mystery. But I remember how I felt about helping that day. And as I think about it, of course, I probably didn't do any good. I'm a small guy now, and picture me as an 11-year-old. I probably didn't do any good. I ate more donuts than I was worth, but I didn't know that, right?
Sure.
So I really felt like I had done some good, and I vowed a vow that I would never miss the opportunity to do good.
Very cool.
Well, over the years, I did miss opportunities to do good. Not to say I never did any good, but I did miss opportunities. But when 35 years later, I got fired from the best job I'd ever had as the CFO of a global food and beverage company, I kind of channeled that enthusiasm of my youth and decided I wanted to do some good in the world. So Gail and I, my wife and I, started out by going to China for a year.
Wow.
We went as part of a program from Brigham Young University. It's sort of an exchange program, except it's just a one-way program where people go over. So I went over. I taught business classes at South China University of Technology. Gail taught English classes. She'd been a school teacher for 25 years, and we had a phenomenal experience. But while I was there, I wrote a book called Your Mark on the World about people doing good and solving big social problems. And I kind of said to Gail, I really want to do this as my career. Can I have your blessing? And she was a good sport, remarkably daring, to just completely change gears from where I'd been as a 25-year finance guy to suddenly now I was going to be an author. How does one do that? I remember, when I was in high school, I said to my dad, who just passed away earlier this year, I said, "Dad, I decided what I want to do with my life, with my career." He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be an author." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, that's not a job. You can't do that."
Wow.
And I remember thinking, "Oh, I can't do that. That's too bad." And I look back and I think, why on earth? What part of me didn't recognize that every book in a bookstore had been written by an author, and that, you know, he could have given me such great advice. He was a smart man. He could have said, oh, great. Well, then why don't you go get a PhD in something that would make you an expert, and you can write about that. And if you want to write fiction, get a PhD in English and in English literature, and you can be the world's best author. And if it doesn't work out economically, you can be a professor. You've got all those other options. He could have given me great advice, but he just said, no, Devin, you can't do that. That's not a job. And so I'm happy to be where I am, doing good, living the dream. I'm an author. Life is good. So that's where I am. That's my story.
So how did you, so when you were in China, what kind of reignited inside of you to start actually pick up the pen or computer and actually start putting words to paper?
Well, what happened was that in 1998, I wrote my first book and sent the manuscript to publisher after publisher. No one wanted to publish it. And I remember in sort of a defiant moment, I said, well, dang it, I'm going to self-publish this then.
Mm-hmm.
So I hired an editor to help me get it polished, and we were working through this. And suddenly I realized, wait a minute, if I do publish this back in the olden days in 1998,
yep,
that means finding a printer, having the books printed, loading my trunk up with books, and during my lunch hour, driving around to bookstores and trying to convince them to sell my book. And I thought about that long and hard, said, I am not going to do that. So I'm not going to finish the project. But then I had the presence of mind and the forethought to say, you know, Devin, in 10 years, in 20 years, what is impossible today will become really easy. Technology is going to change the world. And so I just took all those files and I kept them sacred on my computer, and, you know, across computer, you know, migrations, I kept all these books. And this goes back to, you know, not long after floppy disk days, but, you know, it was a big deal to migrate those books. So when we went to China, I took all those files. I recognized one of the things that had happened between 1998 and 2011, when I was on my way to China, was that, in fact, my prophecy had been fulfilled. It was easy to self-publish. So I did it. I took the files, and in my spare time, I prepared them and got them self-published. And oh my gosh, I remember I sold 79 copies of my ebook for 99 cents each. And I said, woohoo.
Yeah.
In classic super entrepreneur mode, I said to Gail before that month, I said, you know, I'd like to do this for a living, and I know it's going to be tough. If I can sell 100 copies this month, can I do this job? And we sold 79. I think it was. And I said, please, let me please. I said, okay. Very, you know, famous last words, her life's biggest regret, maybe, but here I am.
Cool. So even before 2011, let's go back to 1997, probably, when you actually said, today I'm going to start a book.
Yeah.
What drove you to literally put your hands on the keyboard and actually start writing? What was the impetus to get you actually into the office or wherever you wrote?
Yeah. I saw a need for the book. Now, obviously, all the publishers in the world disagreed, but I saw a need for this book. What I was writing for was an audience for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You know, we used to call ourselves Mormons, but we're not supposed to do that anymore. But that community has some interesting things. They give a lot to their church. That's not unique, but that's a feature of that group. They have large families. Again, not unique, but it's a feature, an identifiable, consistent feature of that community. And then they have these missions. They send their kids on missions around the world, and that's at the family's expense. And so those are three things. And of course, trying to send a lot of kids to college. You get into some fairly identifiable patterns that aren't unique, but not every financial planning book is going to deal with how do you raise a family on a limited budget, giving a lot to charity while you're raising a big family. And then, by the way, in addition to college, send them all on foreign missions. So I really felt like, and it's, in a way, it's surprising that if you go to like a bookstore for that community, you'll find no books until mine showed up that really address all of those features. You can find the traditional secular or faith-based financial planning from other communities, but really none that address all of those issues. And so it was very simple, black and white. And that book, since I did publish it, it actually has been my second best-selling book overall, but it peaked the highest on Amazon's top 100 list. It reached number 6 one day.
Woo! Awesome.
My book, 925 Ideas to Help You Save Money, Get Out of Debt, and Retire a Millionaire So You Can Leave Your Mark on the World, has been downloaded many, many more times and sold many more copies and is available as an audio book, but it peaked at 18. So that first book, I think there really was a need for it. It still is downloaded and sold regularly. People really like that book.
That's actually very cool. So, in the late 90s, then, when you didn't get the publishing contract,
Mm-hmm.
and you realized, wow, self-publishing in the 90s sucks. It's hard.
Yeah.
What was it like to put those files away?
That's an interesting question. It was not as hard as you might think. And part of the reason is the real hard moment, the moment when I was just really beside myself, was when I got the last publisher to say no. And I remember I got that news, I think it was Easter Sunday.
Oh.
If it wasn't Easter Sunday, it was the day before Easter. And the reason that I remember that so vividly is I was so worked up. I'm not sure I appreciated how worked up I was, right? Sometimes when we're just out of our heads, we're least self-aware, right? It's almost an out-of-body experience, right? And I remember that I knew a friend of my dad's had written some books, and I thought, maybe he could give me some advice. It's Easter Sunday. So I call him up and say, can I come over right now? Right now, this minute, and give you my manuscript so you can read it for me on Easter Sunday. That was the real moment of pain, right? It was just excruciating at that moment when I realized that my dream was just spectacularly at risk, and that it might not be achieved. As I worked on the self-publishing plan over the next, I think it was about 120 days before I kind of realized this is just not a thing I can do in 1998. That energy, that angst, that it all sort of bled away. And so by that time, it was an easy decision to just put that away and save it for a future date. But that Easter Sunday, oh my gosh, I was just out of my head.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, yes, yeah. No, I've had that feeling.
Yeah,
It's not fun to get what you know is the last rejection letter.
yeah, yeah.
So then you put the files away, and they sat, and they went computer to computer. What sparked the desire to open those files back up and start working on it again?
Um, they were never forgotten. So, I had been waiting at that point about 13 years for a confluence of events.
Mm-hmm.
The time to create the opportunity and the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I was preparing to leave for China, I assessed the situation. I thought, I may be busy, but I may have a window. I may have a window of time when, between semesters or something, when I can dust off these files and update them. They're 13 years old and the tax code has changed and things. And so I thought, I'll come back to, I'll take them so that I can. Seeing now that certainly the technology had arrived, and then that the opportunity might be there. So when we got to China, we had kind of a lull. They take a long break in China very traditionally, as you might expect for Chinese New Year. It's about 6 to 8 weeks. We did a 4-week tour of Asia, which was phenomenal, but that still left me with about 3 weeks with literally nothing to do, sitting in an apartment in China with, feeling like limited resources. I wasn't going to fly home. Some of our colleagues did that. I was trying to be frugal. And so there, sitting in the apartment with the only thing to do for 3 weeks was, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and work on this book. So I did it.
Very cool. So as you dove back into it and became an author, your dad's words were someplace in the back of your head, "This isn't a job."
Yeah.
How did you deal with what was going on in the back of your head, hearing that not real?
I still agonize over that, and in part because being an author doesn't pay like being a CFO of a multinational corporation, as you might imagine. Yeah. Unless you're J.K. Rowling, selling books is a really hard way to make a living.
Right.
So there is a part of what my dad said that I recognize now as never before. It was true, right? It's a really hard thing to do, and I think he had only my best interest at heart as he said that. But I never forgot that dream all along throughout my career. Probably 3 or 4 other times I actually started a manuscript for a book that never got very far. So the financial planning book was the first one that I really knuckled down on and got serious about and finished. And so I don't know. I remained committed to proving to my father, may he rest in peace, that being an author is a job. But we're still working on that.
Very cool. So as you made this transition into being an author, what was your biggest fear when you really took the big leap after those 79 sales and really went for it? What were you really afraid of?
Nothing. Nothing. In like a classic entrepreneur, I remember feeling no fear, all enthusiasm, all energy, all positive. Sometimes you have to do that. It's the only way you can do hard things that don't make sense, right? Is to allow yourself that kind of almost manic enthusiasm that says, who cares? I'm going to go do this. I'm grateful that Gail was so supportive and has stood by me for now 7 years as we work through this. We've had a lot of successes, but a lot of frustrations along the way too. So it's a constant battle.
So having made this leap to actually follow your dreams, to become an author, what's changed about you?
One of the great things about taking control of your career in the way that I have, at least, is that it's also given me the opportunity to reflect on even more important personal issues in terms of who I am, who I want to be, what my legacy will be, and to devote myself to not only developing my strengths, but to conquer weaknesses. I'm not sure I'm a better person, but I sure try to be a better person. And some of the things that I did in my earlier career weigh on me. And I regret them. And I try to deal with that by trying not to repeat those same mistakes.
So do you find, as you've gotten further into living your dream, that you're actually more aware of how you feel about things?
It's an interesting question. I certainly feel I have more space for thinking about those things. Back in the old days when I had a traditional job, someone else was telling me what to think about, what to worry about. I had a set of problems that were large, meaningful problems that I was responsible for. I'll never forget my last day at the office when I realized that I could leave and these problems would belong to someone else. It was such a great feeling.
No doubt.
That, oh my gosh, I don't have to worry about the report coming up at the board meeting and all those things none of them were my concern anymore. And I was able to move on. And so that has made room emotionally for worrying about my relationship with my wife and my relationship with my son and my relationship with the planet and my relationship with humanity. And all of those things can come into play now. I try not to be too inwardly focused, but at the same time, there's space for that. So I can spend more time thinking about others and doing other-oriented things because of the choices I'm making. So anyway.
Very cool. That's fantastic. I love that. So having done what you've done, I mean, you went off and you've had a cool career. I mean, you've had some awesome jobs that a lot of people, younger people would probably look at and go, wow, that's amazing. What type of advice would you give to somebody who maybe is living that type of life that you were with the great job, but wants to do something else? What type of advice would you give them?
It's interesting. I think what many people, I suspect you've seen this, Shay, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I suspect most people who've made the sort of change I've made have had an experience like I had, where some aspect of their momentum in their past life was ended without their choice, right? Most of them did not wake up one Thursday morning and say, oh, I'm going to make the leap today. Instead, they got fired, someone close to them passed away or got sick, some really external event changed their lives, and they adapted in this remarkable or different way. And I think, it's tempting for me to say, well, other people should be braver than I was and make the leap before I did. And there may be people for whom that is the right advice. But by the other token, one of the things that made possible my leap was the fact that I got a nice severance package. It gave me some real runway to get started and make this transition. And I would never have had the guts to do it without that. So, it would be glib of me to say, just take the leap. But maybe more realistically, I should say, watch for your opportunity. And when it comes, take it. Grab that brass ring or whatever whatever analogy you want to use, but take the opportunity when it comes.
Sure. Good advice. Good advice. And yes, it's a split. There are a lot of people I talk to where an external event has been the driving factor. And then there's some people who, have that, I'm done, I'm going to do my thing. There's a little bit of both that I've talked to.
Yeah. I'm envious of those who are brave enough to make that leap.
Yeah, some of them, blow me away with the things that they've done, which is makes what I'm doing a whole lot of fun to sit and listen and talk to them. So, let me ask you a weird hypothetical. The event that propelled you was losing a job. Who would you be if that event didn't happen?
An interesting question. If I had kept that great job through all these years, it's been 7.5 years, I think. What would have happened? That's an interesting question. I do want to believe that I would have done a lot of good in other ways. I was always perversely proud of tax time, going through and identifying all the charitable donations that I could make. And I missed those days. That aspect of those days, especially more than anything, that's what I miss, was the being able to answer the call when someone said, "Hey, I need some money for this cause or this organization," and being able to write a check, maybe that mattered a little bit, was very fulfilling. I'd like to think that had I not been fired, I would at least be doing a better job of that sort of thing.
Cool.
But it's also tempting for me to believe that I couldn't have continued to do forever what I was doing and might have made the leap ultimately on my own. I want to believe I have that kind of courage buried somewhere inside. Who knows?
Absolutely. So it's an interesting segue into my next question. So if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself some advice, 2 questions. 1, would you? And 2, what would it be?
Yes, I would. And I would tell myself to go be an author. And I would tell myself, probably to look at being a journalist / author, to go to school and get a graduate degree in journalism, to figure out how to do that really well. I've had the opportunity to write more than 500 pieces for Forbes and countless other articles for other publications as well. And I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. I think of the Forbes, my role as a Forbes contributor is sort of an internship in journalism. And, I'm learning a lot. But in hindsight, I really wish I had studied journalism. And so I think that would have been super fulfilling as a career. And for all the money I made in my finance career, quite frankly, I'd have been just as happy on a reporter's salary. So I would definitely go back and give myself advice, and that's what it would be.
Interesting. Very, very cool. So, what's the coolest part of being an author today?
Well, I think it is the way that publishers have been disintermediated. Because it means that now when I have something to say, if I take the time to prepare it, I can put it out to the public and they can read it. And the public can tell me whether it's good or not. I don't need a publisher. And I want to put this into a little bit of context.
Sure.
I have a journalist that I admire, and she works at a very, very well-regarded publication. And from time to time, I pitch her stories. She's never bought one. She's won a Pulitzer Prize. She's an extraordinary journalist. And she's written a couple of books. And recently I read her book, and I noticed her book didn't have a whole lot of reviews, and didn't have a whole lot of great reviews. And so I thought, wait a minute. I think my book has more and better reviews. And I checked, and in fact, my book has more and better reviews than hers. And I thought, wow, that's kind of remarkable. You know, the readers are the ones we really care about. And quite frankly, they like my stuff more than her readers like her stuff. And her readers are like me. They're her fans, right? They're people who look up to and admire her.
Right.
Oh, you know, I'm okay. You know, I may not be J.K. Rowling, but I'm a writer. I'm an author. I'm legit. And I love, and one other time in my career, I tried to get a publisher. You know, I got an agent and went through the whole rigmarole of making a formal proposal to publishers, got shot down again, and I vowed I would never waste a cycle on that again. I get that there are advantages to that model in some respects, but really what authors want more than anything as a general rule is for someone to read and appreciate their work. And if a publisher can't help you do that, they play no role. And these days, publishers don't play much of a role in that, because the first thing they're going to ask you is, tell me about your audience and how you're going to sell your book that we publish. And when you begin to appreciate that math, you realize they're really not playing a valuable role in the marketplace for most authors anymore.
Yep. That is very, very true. So you've got to see a lot of things in life from all the different things you've done and from different perspectives. What's the most important thing in life?
Well, I don't think there's any question about that in my life. There are a lot of answers I think I'm supposed to give.
I want your answer.
But my real life, honest and true answer is my relationship with my wife. There is nothing I value more.
That is beautiful. I love that. So thank you for being honest with that. I greatly appreciate it. So all of your works are self-published?
Yep.
All available on Amazon, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually contributed one chapter to a book that was published by Apostory or something. Anyway, so I do have one published work, but anyway.
But the rest is on your own. So if somebody wanted to learn a little bit more about you or get in touch with you, what are the best means or methods to go about doing that?
There are lots. So I guess I would say, it depends on where you are. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and I accept virtually all invitations I get. I'm at Devin Thorpe. I'm at Devin D. Thorpe on Twitter and Instagram. So you can grab me there easily. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Devin Thorpe. I have a website, devinthorpe.com. There's a link to my email on my Forbes page, forbes.com/site/Devin Thorpe, or just search Devin Thorpe on Forbes.
Very good.
So I'm easy to track down. Sadly, if you want to get a hold of me, it feels to me like I'm such a bother and a nuisance on the internet. I sometimes wonder if there's anything else out there, because I produce so much content. My friends don't follow me on Facebook, I'm afraid, because I publish too much. So.
Well, that's not a bad thing when you're a writer. That's how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of what I think, but I don't know if my friends agree.
Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you spending this time with me today and sharing your awesome story with us. I always wrap up with one question, which is, because I know a chunk of your story, and you've shared a chunk of your story, but I don't know everything. So the question that I always wrap up with is, what question should I have asked you?
The question you should have asked me and didn't, although let me just pause for a moment to say you've asked some brilliant questions.
Thank you.
Very insightful. You're a great host. I'm thrilled to have had the opportunity to be on your show. I'm not sure whether to hope a lot of people or no one watches this because I've been so open with you. I'm a little nervous about that. But the question you didn't ask and could have and should not feel guilty about not asking is, what is your mission? So,
well, what is your mission?
Oh, funny you should ask. My mission is to end extreme poverty, to improve global health, and to mitigate climate change, all by 2045.
That's all?
And of course, I don't feel like it's my job to do that alone. But as an author, as a journalist, as a speaker, I feel like it's my job to inspire everyone to do their part and to especially provide a little wind in the sails for those who are on the ground doing the best and the most work to make those things happen.
Phenomenal. That is fantastic. I love that. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful and very enjoyable conversation. And I hope your mission is a success for all of us.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a delight to be with you.
Thank you.